Here we are in section 8-2, exercises 8 through 10. We still have use of the quadratic formula, so let's remind ourselves of what that is. If we ever have ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, then the answers to this equation will be x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. With a catchy little tune on those as well. So once we get to that point, we'll be able to stick it into this formula and pop out the answers relatively easily. That'll be great. Okay, number 8. The formula for a ball thrown up into the air from a height of 6 feet. Notice that 6 is actually the original starting, would be the y-intercept, and a speed of 80 feet per second. 80 feet per second is right there, positive, meaning it's going up. So this equation from physics is actually, this is gravity, this is its initial velocity, and that's its initial height. Great application. How many seconds? Means we're trying to solve for t, means that's why we've got to use the quadratic formula. After it's thrown, will it take for the ball to be at a height of 100 feet above the ground? So that means we're going to put 100 right over here. So we get 100 as its height and solve for t. 16t squared plus 80t plus 6. Now notice we cannot use the quadratic formula until we get it equal to 0. So 0 equals negative 16t squared plus 80t minus 94. There we go. Okay, so let's solve this out with the quadratic formula. Tx equals negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac. Wow. All over 2a. Wow, that's a big number. Let's see if it simplifies down a little bit. Negative 80 plus or minus, and then let's plug this in. Square root of what? Let's get the calculator out here. 80 squared, which is 6,400, minus 4 times negative 16 times negative 94. Notice we have to use the negative button instead of the minus button on those guys. And this is 384. All over 2 times negative 16 is a negative 32. Okay, so we have two answers. Let's go ahead and plug these into the calculator and see what we get here. Negative 80 plus the square root of 384 and then divide by a negative 32, and we end up with 1.88. 1.887, so 1.89 seconds. Okay, let's stick the other one in with a minus sign on there. That's negative 80 minus the square root of 384. And then take that divided by a negative 32. And we end up with 3.11 seconds. That's kind of weird. We got two answers here. Yeah, and it actually turns out that both of them are true. On this right here, if you were to graph this thing, it's a parabola going up like this, and it started out at 6. And so we're saying, when did it hit 100 feet in height? And there are two answers of where it hits it. And this found both of them. That's great. All right, number 9. The area of a rectangle, so area is length times width, of a rectangle is 118. So let's draw the rectangle out here. We got 118 as the area. The length is 8 more than 3 times the width. What are the dimensions? Okay, so we're going to stick this guy in here and have 118 equals 8 plus 3w times w. Good, let's distribute that in. We have 118 equals 8w plus 3w squared. In order to use that quadratic formula, we've got to get it equal to 0. So let's rewrite this. 0 equals 3w squared plus 8w minus 118. So we subtracted 118 from both sides and wrote it in descending order so that we have the a, the b, and c. That means that w is going to equal negative 8 plus or minus square root 64 minus 4 times 3 times 118 all over 2 times 3. So that is negative 8 plus or minus. Better punch that in. 64 minus 4 times, that's a negative 118. Got to make sure I didn't miss that. 4 times 3 times a negative 118. 1480. So it's the square root of 1480, all divided by 6. Now we could leave these answers as exact answers. We try to take down 1480. We could probably get a 4 to come out of there. Maybe something else. But since this is a real world problem, let's go ahead and put it into decimals. Let's do negative 8 plus the square root of 1480 and divide that whole thing by 6. And we're left with W could be 5.08. 5.08 if we rounded to 2 decimal places. So we're in centimeters. Good. So width is 5.08. And let's try the other one. Negative 8 minus square root of 1480. And divide that by 6. And that's a negative 1. So if we have W equals negative 7 point anything, that's not going to work at all. You can't have a negative 7 width. Both of these points worked up here on number 8 because there were 2 times at which the ball would actually hit. We didn't get a negative time or anything like that. Here we have a negative value for W. Doesn't work. So here is the answer on that one. So W equals 5.08 centimeters. And that would mean, let's go back and find the length here. Length is 8 plus 3 times whatever that W is, 5.08. So let's go ahead and stick that in the calculator. And we get 8 plus 3 times, let's put more decimals in there so we don't get any rounding error, 5.07846. That should be enough. 23.235. So 23.24. So length equals 23.24 centimeters. Excellent. Okay, number 10. A right triangle has one leg. So we're in a right triangle. There we go, right triangle. And that means we're using a squared plus b squared equals c squared. That's the Pythagorean theorem in a right triangle. One leg, x, the other one is 5 less than 4 times the other. And the hypotenuse is 27. So write out a squared plus b squared equals c squared. We get x squared plus 4x minus 5 squared equals 27 squared. Oh boy, x squared plus, go ahead and multiply these out, and we get 16x squared. 4 times 5 is 20. We'll have 2 of those middle terms, so it's a minus 40x plus 25 equals, what is 27 squared? I don't know that one. 729. Okay, let's get them all together so that we can use a quadratic formula. So we get 17x squared minus 40x minus 704 equals 0. Wow, huge. Oh my goodness. Okay, so now we can use the quadratic formula though. Look at that. If you tried factoring this or completing the square, that'd just be horrible. Good thing we have this formula. X equals 40 plus or minus the square root of b squared, so that's going to be 1600, minus 4 times 17 times a negative 704. Whoa, all over 2 times 17. That's crazy. Let's get out the calculator and see what this turns out to be. This will be 40 plus or minus the square root of something over 34. And that is 1600 minus 4 times 17 times negative 704. Enter. Wow. 49,472. 49,472. Okay, let's see what these two come out to be to give us our x. So we can have x equals, and let's punch that into the calculator, see what it is. Let's do the minus one first. 40 minus square root of 49,472. Enter. Divided by 34. Enter. Negative 5.36. So x could be a negative 5.36, which negative 5.36. That doesn't make any sense. Again, in this real world application, you can't have a negative distance. So we're going to toss that one out from the get-go. Now let's do the real one. We have 40 plus the square root of 49,472. Enter, and then divide that by 34. And we end up with 7.718, so 7.72. X equals 7.72. And this is in feet. So feet, there we go. Now the other one is going to be 4x minus 5. So 4 times is 7.72 minus 5. Okay, on the calculator, let's go ahead and punch that out. And that equals, we've got the number right there with all of its decimals. So if you round here and then use that rounded answer, you might be a little bit further off in your next answer. So we're going to use that whole thing. 4 times the whole answer minus 5. And we end up with 25.873. So that's 25.87. And if you chose to round at an extra decimal place, that's not a problem at all. 25.87 feet. So here are the two lengths. Good.